नमस्ते साथीहरू, यो भिडियोमा मैले अंग्रेजी भाषा र लेखन शास्त्रमा लामो समय अध्यापन र अध्ययन गर्ने दुईजना यस्ता विद्वान प्राध्यापकहरूलाई ल्याएको छु, जसले निकै सिपालु सर्जनले शल्य क्रिया गरे जस्तै वाक्यलाई सुधार्ने र तिनलाई उल्टा र सुल्टा दिशामा पढेर वैयाकरणिक शुद्धता अनि शैलीगत स्पष्टता र सबलतालाई केलाउन सिकाउनुहुन्छ। यो भिडियो अलि फरक ढाँचाको हुनेछ, किनकि यसमा हामीले अनुसन्धान र लेखनमा हुने चुनौतीलाई छलफल गरेर भन्दा पनि प्रभावकारी लेखनका लागि भाषाको सूक्ष्म विश्लेषण र सुधार गरेर देखाउने काम गर्नेछौँ। हामीले यहाँ समेटेका धेरै कुरा अंग्रेजी बाहेक अरू भाषामा पनि सामान्य रूपमा लागू हुन्छन्, तर धेरैजसो साथीहरूले अंग्रेजीमा लेख्ने भएको हुनाले अंग्रेजी भाषालाई एडिटिङ स्किल कसरी चाहिँ सुधार्दै लान सकिन्छ भन्ने बारेमा, आफूले आफैलाई कसरी सिकाउन सकिन्छ भन्ने कुरामा ध्यान दिन्छौँ। So to summarize the context of the video I was sharing with the audience in Nepali, who also understand English, by the way, I was saying that I've invited two such scholars and professors of English language and writing who can help us quickly identify and surgically fix patterns of grammatical errors and stylistic weaknesses in our writing. Unlike our other videos where experts answer the moderators' questions about how to tackle specific challenges of research and writing, here the experts will be showing more than telling. Let's get started. We will cover 5 issues that represent some of the most common patterns in our writing as emerging writers and scholars, including broken sentences, ineffective wording, redundancies, lack of rhythm and prosody because of lack of parallelism, and lack of cohesion because of lack of flow. So let me get started. I'd like to request Professor Hammond to illustrate some of the issues with fragments.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here working with you. What I'd like to do in this section of our training is talk about the most frequent ways that we write passages that are not independent clauses or are not complete sentences. And we are often tempted to do so because in spoken English, we will use parts of sentences and get away with it, and they will even make sense. So for example, driving through the rain. Somebody might ask me a question and I might answer them driving through the rain, but driving through the rain is not a complete sentence. It is only a participial phrase. And if you were going to improve your work by making it a complete sentence, you'd have to add an independent clause to that. Driving through the rain, I thought about my little sister. Second example here is another common way that people write fragments, and that is using a participle following a noun, but without thinking about the fact that you need a finite verb, not a participle, in order to make it a complete sentence. So instead of Patricia being the best teacher in the department, we would write Patricia is the best teacher in the department. Third example is a relative clause. Again, a relative clause that follows a noun is a common way for people to think they've written a sentence when they haven't. So the man who had a fancy car is an incomplete sentence. But if you add a finite verb, as on the right we did, the man who had a fancy car drove away. The man drove away is the independent clause in that sentence, and it stands. Fourth example is a dependent clause. There are certain words that we tend, and though is one of them, that we tend to think we've said enough if we've said, though I didn't care that much. But though is a subordinating conjunction. I like to call subordinating conjunctions sentence destroyers. Because I didn't care that much would be a complete sentence, but then you could destroy it by adding a though at the beginning. So since there is no complete sentence there, you go to the right and say, though I didn't care that much, now I have a finite verb and a complete sentence following that. I offered to help for the rest of the week. Finally, we often will write fragments when we're writing a whole bunch of things and we don't notice that we don't have an independent clause somewhere in the sentence. So while I was not the most prepared player, and it was also raining heavily that day, you can tell by our sense of almost physical momentum that we haven't said the main thing yet. And so let's get that independent clause in there. While I was not the most prepared player, and it was also raining heavily that day, I scored the most goals in the match. Thank you very much.
So the second most common pattern of editing issues, Professor Duffy.
Thanks, Sam. Hello, everyone. This slide, we're going to focus on avoiding redundancies, how you can maintain a conciseness and clarity in your writing. So grammatical correctness makes your thoughts clearer and stronger, and depending on the genre or the context, can earn you respect, but we must also apply our sentence and vocabulary skills to refine our writing stylistically. One such strategy is saying what you mean in as few and most powerful words as you can. As you can see, the first example here, you may be able to just delete some words. So on the first sentence, on the left, we have prior to irradiation, the sample chamber was thoroughly flushed with nitrogen to be sure that air was absent during the irradiation. Then on the right, we have fixed it to just delete some words like thoroughly, also the introductory phrase prior to, and just replace that with one simple word, before. Then we could take out thoroughly, and if the idea already conveyed by the other words in the sentence, flushed does just that, you can also take that out. You can translate formal phrases like prior to with less formal words like before, if that's appropriate in context. And then you can condense lengthy clauses and phrases, especially with good, strong verbs. To be sure that the air was absent during the process simply means to remove all air. So in the second example, we see a subordinate clause that can be turned into a subject and a verb for the independent clause that follows. So look for any opportunity to merge two clauses into one, as well as merging two separate sentences into one. So for number 2, we can say, as it can be seen from the figure, the visible spectrum is divided into 2 parts, on the left, and on the right, we're going to take out that whole introductory clause and just simply state the figure shows the visible spectrum is divided into 2 parts. You could take the that out as well. Number 3, on the left, we have the result can be seen to be inconclusive. Watch out for those long verb chains. If you are using a lot of words, condense that down to just one verb. The result is inconclusive. And number 4, on the left, we have this software program has the capability to show the number of operations completed. And we, on the right, can take out a lot of words there. This software can show the number of operations completed.
Okay, the third one, Professor Hammond.
With this slide, we'd like to help to make you conscious of rhetorical choices that you have that are based on grammatical structures, different ways of expressing roughly the same ideas. So let's begin with 2 sentences. This is probably the least efficient way to express anything, is to use 2 separate short sentences. But here we go. Jack took a deep breath. He had lost the game. Tells you the facts, but it has no rhythm to it. So let's look at a second option. First, this would be to use a dependent clause and an independent clause. Because he had lost the game, Jack took a deep breath. The logic there is absolutely clear, and so definitely preferable to number 1. 3, Jack, the losing player, took a deep breath. There's a nice efficiency there and puts the emphasis on both the losing and the breath, so I like that. Losing and worried, Jack took a deep breath. Here we have 2 adjectives modifying Jack, used before Jack, with a comma, getting ready for the main clause. It's another effective way to express the idea, depending on what mood you're trying to get across. Okay, his head spinning because he had lost the game. Jack took a deep breath. This is an absolute, and it allows you to be more specific about what you're talking about, but still allows the main point to be made at the end of the sentence. Take your pick. These are your options.
Yeah, indeed. And we're not necessarily trying to condense. Right. We were trying to look at different options of structuring, organizing sentences for different kinds of stylistic and rhetorical effects. Thank you, Gene. Okay, so the next one, it looks like it's going to be me. This one is about how to maintain parallel structures. When I first came to the US, my readers were pointing out that I didn't have parallel structures. So these are, I think, a South Asian kind of issue. When we have parallel structures, you create more rhythm in your writing, more prosody even. But in addition to that, it's easier to understand, easier to follow, because the reader can predict the pattern they can see a list, and there's a logic to how a list is organized. Let's see with the examples. Animals that come in contact with oil may develop rashes, sores, and show symptoms of blisters. As you notice, this is a noun, but even though the last one in the list of with and is also following up on may develop XYZ, the Z is different. You need to make it similar. So let's see. Animals that come in contact with oil may develop X, rashes, noun, Y, sores, noun, and Z, blisters, noun. So you need to make a list of noun, noun, noun that follows a verb. The study participants had been institutionalized in jails, mental hospitals, or for drug detoxification. As you see, jail is a noun, mental hospital is a noun, whether there's one word or multiple words, noun phrase, but this one is not a noun phrase, it's a prepositional phrase. So just delete the for and you have it, okay? If you really need to split the sentence for a different reason, but if you're going to put in a list, the list must be parallel. Third, the program helps community members learn professional communication skills, learn retail business, and learn sales trainees. You see how it is broken because there's no sales training, but instead sales trainees. If you want to really focus on trainees, you could have done it this way. The program helps community members learn professional skills, enter retail business, and become sales trainees. So there's three verbs: learn, enter, and become. So you have verb phrase, and verb phrase. One way or another, you really need to keep the structures parallel, and that helps you to maintain a rhythm and help the reader to read much better because they can predict. You have a verb, noun, noun, verb followed by something, adverb, but they should all be parallel. Thank you.
Okay, in this slide, we're going to focus more on your whole paragraph, flow and cohesion, by looking at something known as the known new contract. What we have on the left is a paragraph that's written in a choppy way and doesn't really have a lot of flow and repeats the same word, the program, throughout. So let's read that. The Federal Witness Protection Program began in 1968. The U.S. Marshal Service directs the program. Over 4,000 people have been relocated under the program. New identities are created for people in the program, and the people are currently in extreme danger because they have testified against criminals. So you'll see the red text is all new information coming at the beginning of every sentence, sort of suddenly and not very smoothly incorporated into the flow of the meaning. On the right, we rearrange some things so that what comes at the end of the sentence can then be repeated at the beginning of the following sentence, creating a more logical and smooth flow. So let's read how we changed it. Directed by the U.S. Marshal Service, the Federal Witness Protection Program began in 1968. This program has relocated and created new identities for over 4,000 people. These witnesses are currently in extreme danger because they have testified against criminals. So you can see now that the known information and new information are next to each other in successive sentences, creating a logical flow and a smoother understanding of what the author is trying to communicate.
And finally, when we were preparing these common patterns of editing issues and opportunities for statistics improvement, I thought about asking you some other tips, and you have written up some general tips for editing your own writing. Could you please explain? I'll be joining you alongside you in this process.
Okay, so some other editing tips you might want to keep in mind as you're going through your text. Try starting at the bottom of whatever you've written and work your way up paragraph by paragraph or even sentence by sentence. And that way paragraphs will stick out as their own entities that you can check for flow. Sentences will pop out. Errors tend to pop out when you read sentences out of context that you otherwise wouldn't catch reading your text from front to back. Also, a big one, pay attention to the verbs you use. Try to come up with one good, powerful verb instead of a chain of verbs and to be constructions that water down the impact that one good verb could really give your sentence. Keep in mind the rule, less is more. Try to use fewer and better words. Use the dictionary function in your program to look for good, powerful synonyms so you can really create an impact with good vocabulary.
Similarly, when you get feedback, especially for non-native English-speaking writers, you may notice that the reader has pointed out certain patterns in your writing that you're still working on. So try to figure out the reason as to why they told you to, change or edit a sentence, especially if it is repeated. And save a commented copy for another time when you can look over and see why you think they have marked up or suggested change. If possible, also follow up with them so that they can explain why the suggestion was made. And that also means that you could identify and keep a list of your own patterns that you have identified yourself. Oftentimes, writers can identify patterns of weakness in their own writing. Any of us can write a draft, and if we spend enough time carefully looking for errors and weaknesses, we can identify places for improvement. It's always a very good idea to save some time to edit, because especially with publication, lots of grammatical errors can really undermine the chances of your publication. Learn your style habits, both bad and good. Build on the good and try to address the weak ones.
The reason that it's so important, or at least in my mind, the reason it's so important to write drafts is that words are not in your brain. When you have an idea, it does not come in words. It's only when you write it down that you've got words. And once you've got words, then you can say, oh, this one is not as concise as I would like to be, or this is not as precise as I would like to be. So it's very important to write things down, get as many ideas down, and then go back and look at your words and at your grammar and decide whether you've done when you're communicating in the most effective way.
And then finally, give time to fix and improve your writing. Keep improving. It's a lifelong process. Don't get discouraged. All of these slides are meant to help you discover your own patterns, your strengths and weaknesses in your writing. And the more you write and the more you edit your writing, the better your writing becomes. But don't forget to let your writing sit for a while so you can come back with fresh eyes and look for some of these patterns and things that we've covered in this slide presentation.
Thank you very much, Professor Hammond, Professor Duffy. This was a tremendously useful resource that we could create with your support. Thank you for your contribution. भिडियो हेरिदिनु भएकोमा धन्यवाद. यसको बारेमा कुनै प्रश्न छ भने हामीले प्रश्न सोध्ने अवसरको लागि प्रोफेसर डफी र प्रोफेसर ह्यामन्डलाई बोलाउने पनि कोसिस गर्नेछौँ. नमस्ते.